What's up, you guys? As you see, I'm at the house, not in my truck, and I have scheduled home time here anyway, but I also put my truck in the shop for some scheduled maintenance, as well as to get a couple of nuisance maintenance problems dealt with that I could keep going on with. But since I'm off here anyway, it was a good time to get it looked at. Um, some of you guys already know from watching my videos, and I know at least one of you had already commented previously about this one, which would be my clutch. And that's mainly what I want to talk about with this particular video. Because this is one of those, it's not what you would call a typical clutch related problem. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about, in fact, all the different types of issues that you can have with a clutch, or at least that I can think of. I might miss some problems, but um, I'm going to talk about some of them. Now, this is in the context of driving a manual transmission truck. Cars also are very similar. It's just that cars don't have a clutch brake, and cars do have synchronizers on their for the gears, so you operate the clutch a little bit differently on a car than you do on a truck. So keep that in mind if you're driving a car and if you don't have trucking experience. But generally, a lot of this stuff will be translatable either way. But I just want to at least give you guys an update, though. I'll be home until at least Monday, it sounds like, and today being Friday. And I got here earlier in this week because the Dodger game my wife and I went to. And if you guys are friends with me or follow me on Facebook, you guys probably already know that. Or if you watch my channel regularly, you also know that. But anyway, I turned my truck in for what this clutch problem was kind of a it gave symptoms like it was out of adjustment in a way, but at other times it was just fine. So if you guys drive a manual transmission truck or have ever driven one before, you might relate to this a little bit with, okay, normally when you're driving a manual truck, when you're shifting gears, if you're going to use the clutch at all, like you say you're going to double clutch or single clutch, you only push the clutch pedal in maybe like 2 or 3 inches, just far enough to help get it out of the gear that you're in, and maybe push the clutch in a second time to get into the other gear. When you're going through CDL school or getting tested by somebody on shifting gears, you actually have to do a double clutch. So you do have to learn this. But 99% of the drivers out here who are not getting tested on stuff are going to float the gears. So they don't even touch a clutch pedal unless they're starting out from a dead stop or coming to a dead stop. And I've even adjusted some of my own shifting habits because of this clutch problem I have. Because I do tend to double clutch just by choice because, and I'll get some more into the detail on this a little bit later, why I tend to like doing double clutching. Simply put, though, it's the manufacturer actually recommends it, and they recommend it for a reason. So, and I actually do find that it takes less effort to get in and out of gear when I use the clutch pedal, and I don't have leg problems and all that. So, like some people do have. So, I don't have a problem with doing it. And if I really did have that much of a problem with it, I would just go ahead and drive an auto shift truck, which you guys know how much I love. Not. Anyway, let's not ramble on too much. I want to talk about what my particular clutch problem is, and I'll talk about a couple other common clutch issues that you might have. That the symptoms I described might help you narrow down your potential causes. Okay, so my clutch problem, it first started out as just a simple out of adjustment issue, and what I mean by out of adjustment is there's what they do is they'll check how much pedal play there is before you actually hit resistance. So on my clutch, let's say if I could sometimes push it halfway to the floor before I get any kind of resistance at all. Basically, when I start getting up against the hydraulic side, because my truck, just so you know how it's arranged, I have a PACCAR MX-13 engine in there, and it has a hydraulic has a hydraulic clutch on it. So what I mean by hydraulic clutch is it's hydraulically actuated. So if you go for my clutch pedal, follow the linkage and plumbing whatever down to the transmission. What it is it's mechanical until it goes through the firewall, and then right on the other side of the firewall is my clutch master cylinder. And then from the master cylinder, I don't have the truck with me, and I can't remember if it's 1 or 2 hydraulic lines right there that go from there down to the slave cylinder, which is over by the transmission or the bill housing. And then basically the slave cylinder, I would more call it an actuator, where it actually pushes the pivot fork. There's a fork that pivots inside on one side of it's on the outside of the bell housing, one side of it's inside the bell housing. On the inside of the bell housing, there is what's called a throwout bearing. or pivot bearing. Okay, so the actuator will push on one side of it like that, and the other end of it will move the other way. It'll push the pivot bearing or throw-out bearing toward the. There's a pressure plate, and then the clutch, and then the flywheel mounted to the end of the engine crankshaft. And the pivot bearing also sits on a what's called an input shaft. That's basically separated that it goes in between the engine and the transmission. Not going too much into great detail on that. Ultimately, what was happening was I could push the pedal in about halfway to the floor before I'd get any kind of resistance at all. It should not be like that. I should be feeling resistance pretty much immediately. As soon as I start pushing the pedal down, I should feel something. Didn't quite work that way though. So when you do have that kind of effect, what happens is when you're in a truck that has a clutch brake, again, the clutch brake does not apply to automotive manual transmissions. The clutch brake was not getting actuated very at all or effectively. So what happens is when I'm at a stop and I want to put it in gear, I have a hard time getting it into gear because for some reason I can't get the transmission to stop with the clutch brake. And usually what's done for that is they just do a clutch brake adjustment or a clutch adjustment. Basically, it's they do some. There's usually like an opening down there at the bottom of the bell housing that they can use to make adjustments in there without actually pulling the entire transmission off on trucks. It's not always the case, but on mine it is, and a lot of other trucks it is too. Anyway, they did the adjustment. They said it was just fine on this recent week. And I finally got down to the bottom of what actually was going on. And mind you, last time I took the truck to the dealer, which was, I think, to Rush, Peterbilt, and Fontana. And another reason why I'm not a big fan of taking my truck there. They don't value my time. And so I'm not going to say too much nice about Rush, Peterbilt. Anyway, last time I took my truck to them for this same issue, because sometimes it'd be really super sloppy. And I can't really even feel the resistance when I'm hitting my clutch brake. Because when you're normal, that's something else here I forgot to mention. When I go to actuate my clutch pedal, operate my clutch pedal, I should get resistance right away, and then I should be able to go in so far until I'm about a couple inches or so, I don't know, maybe an inch or two away from the very bottom of its travel, and then I should start feeling some more resistance there. And when I'm feeling that is when the clutch brake is actually being operated, and then I'll end up hitting the hard stop at the end. So with that in mind, so you have kind of an idea of what I expect to feel. Now you'll understand more when I explain what I really am feeling is not what I'm expecting to feel. So so when it's out of adjustment like this, I can push the clutch pedal in about halfway to the floor and not feel even one bit of resistance before I start feeling something. And I can put it all the way to the floor and not actually for sure feel the clutch brake being operated. And when that happens, it makes it difficult for me to get into gears. And normally I don't start out in first gear. I usually start out in second. Even when I'm heavily loaded, if I'm on flat terrain or something, I usually will start out in second. Or if I'm downhill, I'll go in third. Some people will actually start out in higher gears, like when they're bobtail, but I don't recommend doing that because you can actually wear out your clutch by doing that. Even as a bobtail, if you're always starting in too high gear, it puts wear and tear on the clutch. And for a comparison, I double clutch more than a lot of people do, way more than a lot of people do. I also float sometimes. You guys might see on my recent videos. I've been mostly floating lately because of this problem, and I know how to float. I just prefer to double clutch most of the time. And anyway, not rambling too much on that, I guess. So last time I took it to Rush Peterbilt, what they did was just do a clutch adjustment, and I just got the clutch. Last time I got it adjusted, it was doing the same problem within a week after I got it adjusted. So I know it's not an adjustment issue, not to mention it's not consistently doing it like that. Sometimes it would act like it's out of adjustment. Sometimes it acts like it's normal. So I'm like, there's something else going on here. I know it. I just didn't know the system, the particular system well enough. I've done my own auto maintenance. I've even changed my own transmission, changed my own engine, changed my own clutch and everything on my cars, but automotive clutch designs are a little bit different from truck clutches. So they're very similar in how they operate. It's either usually you have mechanical linkage going all the way to the pivot fork, or you have something else going on there, like either air or hydraulic fluid that goes basically from the firewall down to the transmission. or I should say the bell housing. And in my case, it's the bell house. It's the hydraulic system. Um, so I don't mind. No, this is where I started bringing my aircraft maintenance experience into the picture and thinking, you know what? Because I do have a hydraulic clutch, and I used to work on a bunch of hydraulic parts. I wasn't a hydraulic specialist when I was an aircraft mechanic, but I did specialize in flight controls, landing gear, and actuated doors. Basically, anything that had a hydraulic actuator hooked up to it is basically what I maintained most of the time. I was also a flight line crew chief for so many years, like for a chunk of time as well, like 6 years or so. But most of the time I worked in kind of a back shop specializing in landing gear and flight controls, which have nothing but hydraulic actuators on them. And I mean, these are on large airplanes too. So there's this thing that I would commonly see on the airplanes called hydraulic bypass, internally bypassing. Yeah, hydraulic, bypassing internally. Basically, when you have an actuator, that has because on aircraft, I'm kind of going a little story time here for you guys to get a little bit more of an understanding. So you have an actuator, basically it's just a piston and a cylinder, just like a shock strut, for example. But now on the cylinder, but there's a seal that separates the two sides from each other. Um, so when when it comes to a hydraulic actuator, when you want to retract the actuator, you basically push hydraulic fluid into the side closest to the piston side, the skinnier chrome surface side, or if there is a chrome, if you ever look at a hydraulic actuator, it's usually a chrome surface on the inside and then like a housing on the outside that the chrome surface goes into. So just so you understand the terminology here, the fat side, the housing part is what you call the cylinder. The cylinder. And then the chrome surface side that goes inside is what you call the piston side. All right, so that in mind now, when you operate a hydraulic actuator, you usually push hydraulic fluid into the side of it that's on whichever side of the separator that it keeps the fluid from one side of the other to the away from the other side. Now, so you'll have like hydraulic fluid on the in between the top of the piston and the top of the cylinder housing, and then some other fluid that goes in between where it goes into the cylinder housing and the bottom of the the side that's on the piston side. So when you push fluid into the piston side, it retracts the piston, or retracts the actuator, as you might call it. And then when you go to when you want to extend it, you push fluid into the opposite side, and it pushes hydraulic fluid back out the hose on the piston side. And basically, it should stay in a closed loop. And on aircraft, they usually have two lines. There's a supply line and a return line. Normally, like a supply line, if it's been a bit, I want to say is the skinnier line, and because it's higher pressure, and then there'll be a return line that's usually fatter. Okay, so applying the same logic to my truck's clutch. The way it was acting with sometimes it'd be out of position, sometimes it wouldn't, and even trying different things where I'd clue in on. It seemed like when I'd go down hills and hit my brakes a little bit more abruptly, it actually seemed to help with the clutch issue, where I'd help it go back into adjustment. But then I could be like say at a stop or something and holding my clutch pedal in, and I can actually feel it getting like looser and looser on me, like something like it's still moving, even though I should not be moving at all. And that was a clue to me that there might be some hydraulic bypassing going on in the line or something, or air getting into the system or something along that line. And so I was really suspicious of that. And so when I turned the truck in for maintenance the other day, I ended up finding out yesterday that they did indeed basically trace the problem back to the hydraulic side of the system. They said my clutch was fine, the adjustment was fine, everything inside looked like it was fine, no wear issues or whatever they were concerned about. But they did figure out that there's something going on there. I think bypass. They kind of the woman I talked to said it was she used some different terminology and stuff, but the gist of it was basically bypassing. And so what they're doing is they're going to replace the master cylinder, the hoses, or the hose, whatever, I forget which, if one or two, and then the slave cylinder as well. So once that part of the system is fixed and ready and done, my truck should be back to normal as far as the clutch is concerned. Still have an air conditioning related issue, more specifically the HVAC system in the sleeper berth, which is really a pain in the butt in the hot summer months, because my EPU doesn't want to stay running in hot weather. So it'll stay running if I'm not using my air conditioning system on the APU, but if I run it in hot weather, or even when my reefer unit is running and blowing hot air down at my catwalk area, I have more of a tendency for the APU to shut off prematurely and not stay running. So in lieu of that, what I've been doing is relying more on the truck, idle in the truck. But then now, if the sleeper berth AC system isn't working, I have to rely on the front section AC, and it doesn't do such a great job of getting the air back to me. So I mean, I can fill it a little bit, but not nearly enough. So those are the two things I'm mainly getting worked on with it. Um, I have a couple other things that I'm gonna like. I have what's called a temperature actuator, I guess, or as a friend of mine called it, a door valve that's back behind my dashboard. Easy part to get to though, and I should be able to replace it myself. I actually already bought the part for it, because when I start the truck up, this part that's back there would make this buzzing sound like it's trying to operate but it can't. And also, I found out that it coincided with my AC system only blows cold air, like the max cold, temperature, and it won't go any warmer. So told me it was probably something temperature valve related, but I didn't know what the actual nomenclature was that they called it at the dealer. I just ended up taking a picture of it, because all I had to do was pop open the instrument panel right there, where my trailer and tractor parking brakes are at, and my fifth wheel switch and all that kind of stuff. It's all right there. My same, as well as my Qualcomm unit. That panel there, just pop it open, and right back there on this duct, this HVAC duct that's back there, is a valve right there that's what I trace the buzzing sound to. And at least I have cold AC, and it's summertime, so I wasn't so concerned about it right now, but it's going to get to the point pretty soon where the weather's going to start cooling off. And we're already feeling it here. As you guys know, I live in Southern Cal in the desert, and it's hotter than shit here during the summertime. But now we're already getting into the second half of August. Normally it's usually 110 degrees during the daytime here, but it hasn't quite been that hot here this week, I would say. And even my wife was noticing, like at night, when she's maybe getting home, or maybe getting ready to leave early in the morning for work or something, that it's definitely cooling off in the mornings from what we've been experiencing lately, over the last month or so. So good cue to actually get these issues worked out now before it starts to cool off in other parts of the country and become a bigger issue. Because especially with I have a condition called Reynolds Syndrome. I think I'm pretty sure I got it from when I went through chemotherapy back in 2002. Basically, it's a form of neuropathy where in colder weather, my fingers on this hand, my right hand, when it gets cold, my hand will turn completely white, and it'll get numb also, and I'll lose sensation and all that. It even gets where like when I'm holding the steering wheel, the texture feels different on my right hand than it does the left, and I can't grip the steering wheel quite as well as I can with the left hand. So a lot of different things I noticed there, and I'm pretty sure it's called Reynolds Phenomenon. It was at least from a research I've done and in the past, and never had it until after I went through chemo. But I don't know if it was that, or maybe when I first started doing jiu-jitsu training, maybe I did some nerve damage or something with because you put a lot of use a lot of you work out your neck muscles a ton when you're in Brazilian or Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. So those of you guys who don't know anything about that art know exactly what I'm talking about. And to do a lot of shoulder rolls or using your head to lift your hips up off the ground, or hip escape or whatever, a lot of other things where you actually rely on like pushing your head against the ground and lifting your body up, or a lot of stuff. So puts a lot of it can put more strain on your neck, and there are times where just certain movements on my neck, I don't know, I could have done some damage to a nerve or something, but it's just been so long since I've had this issue, I can't remember which one of those two started my problem there. All right, but anyway, that's kind of rambling here. I wanted to talk mostly about the clutch, but I also want to give you guys an update on what's going on. So let's finish talking about the clutch. And some of the other common issues that you might run into. One, if you have a worn clutch, that's the most common thing that people run into. And wearing out a clutch is a large product, to a large extent, result of your own clutching habits. If you have two things spinning at the same speed and they come together, you don't put any wear on them. When they spin at different speeds and they're apart, and then they come together and they're spinning at different speeds, you're taking some surface off of that. Basically, and that's what the clutch is for. So the more you can keep the speed of both sides at the same, right at the same amount, basically the engine speed and what the clutch is spinning at the same when you engage and disengage the clutch, you'll put a lot less wear on it. Good case in point, when my sister and I were both younger, still in high school, we used to tear the crap out of my mom's Honda clutch. That thing would only last like a good 55,000 miles at a time before my parents would have to replace it, because she and I would tear the shit out of it. We'd drive it like idiots, or just didn't know how to effectively preserve the life expectancy of the clutch. And so I get a bit older now. I'm having my own vehicles that also drive our manuals. I always made it a point to always drive manuals. I hate automatics. I've only owned 2 automatics myself, and one of them was only because I needed a configuration for family. Actually, both of them. Anyway, that said, so my thought process is, man, these clutches don't last very long. So when I end up driving, I had a 2000 Mitsubishi Eclipse at one point in time. I ended up doing an engine change on it, and when I went to do the engine change, I figured, all right, well, I'm going to have the clutch accessible anyway, and I already had I think getting close to 120,000 miles on the car at the time. And I was saying, man, this clutch's got to be wearing out by now, so I might as well just go ahead and get me a new clutch assembly and put it in there. I get a new clutch, and on a car, it's only, for just a regular standard, OEM type clutch, it's only going to cost you $100 or so, maybe $200 at most, but usually $100, $150 for a clutch with throw-out bearing and all that. So I bought these parts just to be sure. That way I know for sure I'd have a good clutch in there. And then when I do the engine change, I realize the clutch that's already in there has a ton of wear left on it still. I wasn't even close to there's like wear rivets on the clutch plate. You'll see the friction material on there, and then when the friction material wears down so far, there's like these rivets that go through the plate, and eventually it gets to where it hits those rivets, and then that's when you start slipping normally. Anyway, what happens is, how do you know when your clutch is worn? Is when you start driving it and you're not even touching the clutch pedal, and let's say you're under power. Let's say I don't know, maybe you have a 5-speed transmission. You could be in, let's just say, 4th gear or something, or really any gear, and all of a sudden you'll start feeling the engine speed up, feeling and hearing the engine speed up, the car's not doing the same. So, or sometimes maybe even the car starts losing speed when the engine's speeding up, and that's kind of like when you're actually pressing the clutch pedal in, but just revving the engine only or something. Or that's what normally happens when you have a worn clutch. So when you have, if you ever drive in a manual transmission vehicle and you feel that symptom, that's a pretty good sign of a worn clutch. But I will say that with my truck, not too long ago, I had actually last summer, I remembered I was going across I-70 through the Rocky Mountains, and ended up going across I-70 all the way to I-15. The same day that they reopened I-70 from the wildfires I went through there last year. Because I remembered I'd picked up a load in Greeley, Colorado, and was taking it to Southern Cal. On that particular case, I was having this same alternating clutches out of adjustment kind of thing going on, and there were a couple of uphill grades when I was in Utah, still going on with that load, where I was starting to get this effect where it felt like my clutch was worn. I was starting to, I'm not even touching the pedal, but when I'm under power and I had a 40,000 pound load, I was taking up 6% grades, and all of a sudden the truck would start revving up on me and start losing speed. And I think I'd have to downshift. And then I was even playing around with like what RPMs I could be at or stuff to keep it from slipping. And I ended up making it through there okay. But it was those 2 times on that one trip are the only 2 times I ever felt it slip. And those slips were indicators to me that the clutch could have been worn, but at the same time, no, this doesn't feel right, because I've driven cars with worn clutches before, and it's pretty consistent every time. It doesn't matter if you're on flat terrain, uphill grade, whatever. If you're putting a load on that clutch with the accelerator, it's going to slip sooner. It's at some point in time on there. Usually, especially as you get closer to your peak torque level, or peak torque RPM. So there was just those 2 times only, and then after it got back in adjustment enough, whatever, it never slipped again. I've even driving it a whole year with the clutch pedal acting like that now. I've never once had it slip. The only issues I've ever had is with trying to get it into gear when when I'm at a stop or something, um, and that's about it. Okay, so that's basically the symptom of a worn clutch. Now let's talk about an overheated clutch. That's another common thing. When you overheat the clutch, basically you're putting too much, you're scraping on it too much. You're also wearing it out at the same time. But when you're doing that, because you're causing friction there, and that friction creates heat. It's just like when you're using the brakes on your truck or a car going down a hill or something. You ride your brakes, they're going to get hot. All right, you get a clutch hot enough, and what'll happen is the surface will warp, and it's just like when you get the rotors on your brakes on your car or something. When they warp, you'll feel a chattery kind of feel when you're slowing down. All right, so when you're actually using a clutch that's been overheated, you'll kind of have that same effect where you'll feel a kind of thing until it's completely engaged or disengaged. So those are two things you want to watch for. Those are the common reasons of why a clutch itself needs to be replaced. But in my case, it's a lot of people won't know that the kind of symptoms I'm having are actually hydraulic side and not anything to do with what's inside the bell housing side. So that's why I wanted to really talk about this, because a lot of I say if it helps somebody else out who has a similar problem and don't really know what's going on there, I would start being really highly suspicious of the hydraulic side of the clutch. All right. Actuator basically bypasses. There is a YouTube video I can point you to where a guy kind of explains using an aircraft, it looks like an aircraft hydraulic actuator on a bench to explain how we can tell that it's bypassing. He did the video basically because somebody who was using had it in their equipment, whatever it was. I don't remember if it was an aircraft or something else, but they suspected that it was bypassing because of certain little things they saw. So they took the actuator off the whatever it was, and he put it in the shop, and you can see it had the actuators on both sides. And he said, yeah, when I disconnect the side that's basically on the top of the cylinder, and when I put fluid into it, you're going to see the actuator still try to extend, even though it should not be extending at all, because there's basically the fluid that's on one side is stuck. So anyway, I don't know. I might add in a link to that one or something so you guys can watch that if you really want to understand this a little bit more. But mostly I just want to, like I said, just explain that not every clutch related problem has something to do with your throwout bearing or a clutch itself or whatnot. In my case, like I said, it was the hydraulic side, and hopefully be fixed up on Monday. Then see how long it takes for them to fix my AC problem too, which I think is just going to be the control switch on the back on my sleeper berth. But again, this is the symptoms that I've noticed over time, and I have reason to think that's it, but I'll find out once it's all done. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and end this one. I do still have 2 more pickup delivery type videos that I need to work on that were prior to me coming home, that I'll get posted for you, edited and posted for you guys. Hopefully I'll have at least one of them up online later at sometime today, and maybe have the other one up tomorrow, hopefully. So, I don't know, or sometime over the weekend. But all right, that's all I have on this one. Appreciate you guys taking the time to listen again or watch, and we'll see you guys pretty soon. Thanks. Bye.